I was smiling for the camera when my dad leaned in and said, "You know, Lily is the greatest achievement of my life." I froze. The applause for my graduation drowned out the silence in my chest. I was holding a diploma with honors, but I might as well have been invisible. Have you ever stood inches from someone you love and realized they don't see you at all? That was the moment something broke in me. Not loudly, quietly, like a thread snapping inside my throat. And that's where my story really began. Not with a celebration, but with an erasure. The sound of clapping faded into a dull roar in my ears, like water rushing through a tunnel. I stood behind him, behind my father, smiling for the photos, holding my diploma in both hands. Honors in English literature. 4 years of sleepless nights, working 2 jobs, managing straight A's. And still, I was background noise. "You know," he said, turning to the family friend beside him, "Lily is the greatest achievement of my life." I didn't drop the diploma. I didn't even blink. I just looked past his shoulder, straight into the crowd of proud parents and tearful graduates, and waited for my body to feel something. Rage? Sadness? Nothing came. Just silence. Like my name had been quietly erased from the air. I stepped away. No one noticed. Not even when I left the stage. There were no arms around me, no camera clicks in my direction. The camera had found Lily, already posing with her bright smile and sunlit curls. I stood in my cap and gown near the back exit, alone. And when I say alone, I don't mean physically. I mean that kind of alone where even if someone touched your shoulder, you'd still feel like a ghost. You ever been in a room full of people who claim to love you and still felt like a stranger? At home, I went to shower. When I came out, I saw Mom's Facebook post on the kitchen laptop. It was a memory. Lily's high school graduation. The caption read, "What a proud moment for our family." No mention of me. Nothing about the day that had just happened. The timing wasn't subtle. Neither was the message. I opened my journal, the one I hadn't touched since sophomore year. I wrote just one sentence. "Today I graduated, but I don't think anyone noticed." I didn't plan on writing more. But once the ink touched the paper, the dam broke. My hand moved without asking. I wrote for 2 hours that night, about how invisible I'd felt growing up, about the way Lily's name echoed in our house like a hymn, while mine was something people only remembered when it was convenient, about how even my accomplishments felt like accidents in their eyes. The next morning I went looking for a charger and opened Mom's keepsake drawer. There, tucked under old report cards and baby photos, I found something strange. A letter, folded neatly, addressed to my Anna. It was dated August 2008, the day I started kindergarten. "My dear girl," it began, "you are the light of my life, the first spark that made me a mother." I froze. The same woman who now cropped me out of photos had once called me her light. I read the letter 3 times. Each word felt like it belonged to a different universe. I kept digging through the drawer. Maybe I was looking for proof that I wasn't imagining all of this, that I had mattered once. In the back of the drawer, I found a plastic flash drive. Bright pink, shaped like a cartoon cat. I recognized it instantly. It used to belong to Lily. Curiosity took over. I plugged it into my laptop. It held dozens of folders, mostly silly videos, school projects, dance routines, prank compilations. Then I found a folder named LOLA. I clicked. The first video loaded slowly. My internet lagged just enough to build suspense. On screen, a 12-year-old Lily grinned into the webcam. She spoke in that high-pitched, exaggerated voice she used when imitating me. "This is Anna," she said, adjusting her hair. "She lives in her room. She's allergic to fun, and she thinks poetry is a personality." Laughter from off-screen, probably her friends. "She's like a sad parasite. You know, like a ghost that eats cereal." They laughed harder. I didn't realize I'd stopped breathing until the screen glitched. My hand was still on the trackpad, but I couldn't move. My chest felt tight, like something I'd buried years ago was clawing its way out. I closed the laptop. My finger hovered over the flash drive. I should have deleted it, thrown it away, burned it. But instead I sat there, staring at the last frozen frame on the screen. Lily smiling, mid-laugh, her eyes glowing with amusement at my expense. Then the screen turned black, and for just a moment, white text appeared. If only she knew. I didn't know what it meant, not yet. But something told me this wasn't just a joke video. It was a mirror, and for the first time I saw what they really thought of me, not just what they said to my face. The day after I watched Lily's video, I couldn't focus on anything. I sat in the campus library, surrounded by textbooks and laptops, but my mind kept returning to that USB, to the words, "sad parasite," to the laughter that sounded too familiar, so I did the only thing that felt right. I opened my laptop and created a blog. No name, no photos, just a blank page and a title. Ghost of the Living House. I didn't plan to write anything special, but my fingers moved before I could think. My first post began. "I am the invisible daughter. You know her. You just never notice her." I wrote about growing up in a house where mirrors only reflected one child. About being called quiet, like it was a defect. About trying to scream without making a sound. The title of the post, "I'm the shadow of a girl you're following online." I clicked publish. I expected nothing. Maybe 2 views. A spam comment. Instead, within hours, it had over 500 views. Then 1,000. By the time I woke up the next morning, it had gone viral. Comments poured in. "This is literally my sister and me. Did we grow up in the same house? My mom still tells me I should smile more, like my cousin." I read every comment. Each one felt like someone placing a hand on my shoulder, whispering, "You're not crazy." I returned to the library that evening, sat in the far back by the window. Rain tapped the glass like tiny reminders that the world was still turning. I opened my laptop and reread the comments. My chest tightened, but not from pain, from relief. Then something cracked. I don't know if it was a tear or a laugh or a sob stuck in between, but I broke, quietly. No noise, just a shaking breath and hands covering my face. Someone finally saw me. 2 days later, a YouTuber with over 1 million subscribers tweeted, "Just read the ghost blog. Whoever this is, publish a book. I'd buy 10 copies." I stared at the screen, mouth open. Was this real? I refreshed the page. The blog now had 20,000 followers. For the first time, the story of my life was being read on my terms. Not through my sister's TikToks or my parents' dinner conversations, but raw, flawed, and painfully mine. I posted a new entry every 2 days. Titles like "How Praise Became Poison," "Dinner Conversations I Wasn't Involved in," "Why I Memorized the Floor Tiles Instead of Speaking." People weren't just reading, they were waiting. Then came the message that changed everything. "Your sister's talking about you," a follower DM'd me, linking to a TikTok. I opened it. Lily stood in her bedroom, eyes wide and wet, her voice cracking. "I don't know who's running that blog," she said, "but they're trying to ruin my life." She scrolled through a few screenshots. This is what I have to deal with. Lies, attacks, From someone who clearly hates me. She didn't mention my name. She didn't have to. Everyone knew. The video blew up. Sympathy poured in. Stay strong, Queen. You're the bigger person. Haters gonna hate. I didn't react. Not online. Not out loud. But at 2:13 a.m., my phone lit up. Mom's cell. I answered. Sleep still clung to my voice. Her words were sharp, fast, angry. How could you do this to your sister? You're twisting everything. We raised you better. Before I could answer, another voice came through. Dad. This isn't just immature, Anna. It's dangerous. You're embarrassing the family. I sat up in bed, the darkness pressing down on me. I didn't yell. Didn't defend. I just asked, so my truth is embarrassing? Silence. I let it sit there. Is it not true because you don't like how it sounds? I asked. More silence. Then the line went dead. I stared at the ceiling for a long time after that. I expected to cry. I didn't. I expected to feel guilty. I didn't. I felt empty. But in a clean way. Like something had been scraped out that didn't belong. I didn't hear from them for 2 weeks. No calls, no texts. The silence used to hurt. Now it felt honest. I continued writing. Summer came quickly, like a breath I didn't know I was holding. I packed my bags in silence and moved into a mostly empty dorm, one of the few still open between semesters. I told no one. Not Lily, not my parents, not even my old friends from high school. The blog kept running, but I stopped checking comments. I didn't need applause. I needed air. I took a job at a small coffee shop near campus. My name tag just read A. No one asked questions. No one recognized me. I made lattes, swept floors, and walked home to a room that didn't know who I used to be. You ever lived a life where no one had expectations of you? Where no one called your name? Not out of neglect, but because they didn't know it? That kind of invisibility is quiet, clean. Not the painful kind I grew up with. It felt like floating. I started writing again. Not for the blog, but for myself. Pieces of fiction that weren't really fiction. Stories about girls who turned themselves into stone so no one could break them. Stories about mirrors that showed you what your parents didn't see. I didn't care if they were good. They were honest. One morning, while wiping down the pastry case, I looked up and saw her. Professor Bennett. She taught creative writing. Tall gray streaks in her hair. Always wore black, like a walking poem. She ordered a plain coffee, no sugar, then glanced at my name tag. A, she said. Like the anonymous blog? My heart paused. She smiled gently. Don't worry. I won't say a word. But I recognized the voice. That kind of pain doesn't fake itself. Later that day, she emailed me. Subject line. Let's talk about what you're really writing. We met in her office that week. I admitted everything. I expected her to look at me like everyone else did. Concerned, confused. Maybe disappointed. Instead, she said, You write like someone who's never been allowed to speak. And I know that hunger. She told me about her own childhood, how she was born out of an affair, raised in a home where no one said the word half-sister, but it hung in the air like smoke, how she wasn't allowed to exist fully, so she started writing stories where girls like her got to live loudly. That blog, she said, was your first scream. Now let's help you speak. With her guidance, I started working on a book, not a memoir. A novel, but one drawn from bone-deep memory. The title came to me one night as I folded laundry. The youngest never cries, so the oldest disappears. I wrote every morning before my shift, and every night before bed. Pages filled with fiction. Yes, but also with the truth I wasn't brave enough to speak directly. I wrote about a girl named Elise who learned to stop raising her hand in class because her sister's answers were always louder, who memorized the cracks in the wall so she wouldn't interrupt dinner conversations, who became so good at disappearing that she didn't know how to return. I didn't expect anyone to read it. Professor Bennett did. Then she sent it to a friend who ran an indie literary site. He published the first 2 chapters under a pseudonym. It was shared 5,000 times in one night. Readers called it haunting, visceral, too familiar. Comments poured in. Not just sympathy, but recognition. Women wrote, "This was my life. This is my sister. This is me." I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt exposed, like someone had peeled me open and pinned me to a bulletin board. Then came the email. An indie publisher, small but respected, reached out. They wanted to publish the full novel. There was just one condition. "We'd like to release it under your real name. Your voice deserves to be heard." I stared at the email for hours. Part of me wanted to scream yes, to finally claim the story I'd lived and the art I'd made from it. But another part remembered the midnight calls, the silence, the backlash. What if coming forward meant breaking what was already fractured? I began typing a polite decline. Halfway through the email, I checked the literary site again. A new comment had appeared under the chapter. "If this is the daughter of Mr. Peterson from Willow Creek, it all makes sense now." I froze. That was my father. That was my town. And someone, somewhere had already put the pieces together. I thought I had time. Time to choose whether or not to step into the light. Time to decide if I wanted to carry my story under my name or keep it safely tucked behind a screen. But stories, especially true ones, rarely give you that luxury. The post came one morning, tagged in a thread I hadn't meant to see. A screenshot, a name, mine. "Is this the girl who wrote The Youngest Never Cries? Peterson, right? Her sister's that influencer chick." The account wasn't big, but it had followers in my town. A former classmate from high school, apparently proud to be the one who connected the dots. Within an hour, my inbox filled with new messages. Some supportive, some accusatory, many invasive. By that evening, my face was circulating in group chats, online forums, and even gossip pages. The anonymity I had clung to was gone, shattered like glass under a spotlight I hadn't asked for. And then came the press. A producer from a popular talk show emailed me, offering an exclusive sit-down to discuss the real story behind the viral novel and the broken family dynamic that inspired it. I didn't reply. They followed up with a call. I declined politely. But a few days later, clips from an old interview I did in college were spliced into a segment about family estrangement and online revenge culture. They used my voice, my face, and none of my consent. It spiraled quickly from there. Lily's followers exploded with speculation. Her comment sections turned chaotic. Some fans defended her, others attacked her. And when the chaos hit a boiling point, she did what she always did. She cried on camera. "This is destroying my family," she said through tears. "I never wanted this." I watched the video in silence. No anger, no judgment. Just the numb recognition of someone who had seen this performance before. But then came something different. A voice message. Not from my parents, from Lily. Her voice shook, but it wasn't the kind she used for the camera. "I know I hurt you. I know I didn't see it then. But this, it's breaking everything. Can you please just stop now? Please." I didn't respond. I didn't delete the message either. Instead, I opened my manuscript. I reread every word, every chapter, every line I had written, not for vengeance, but for truth. And when I reached the end, I made a decision. I emailed the publisher. Yes, publish it under my name. Don't change a word. The backlash was immediate. My parents didn't call. They didn't email. But I heard from someone who did. Professor Bennett texted, "Your mother lost her brand deal with that home lifestyle company. They cited public controversy over family values." I should have felt guilt. I didn't. Not because I didn't care, but because for once the consequences weren't mine alone to carry. The launch event was modest. A small bookstore downtown, rows of folding chairs, a table with stacks of my book. The sign above me read, "Anna Peterson, author of The Youngest Never Cries." No family showed up. I had expected that. I dressed simply. No makeup, no dramatics, just myself. People filed in slowly. Not hundreds, but enough. Some came with books in hand, eyes wide with recognition. Some came because they'd read my blog years ago. Others were strangers who'd seen themselves in Elise, the fictional girl who disappeared to survive. One girl, maybe 19, stepped up to my table near the end of the line. She had a trembling smile and shaking hands. I just wanted to say, "You wrote what I've never been able to say out loud," she whispered. "My mom always said I was too quiet to count. But reading your words, it made me feel like maybe I'm not broken." She cried. I didn't stop her. I signed her book, wrote, "You are not invisible. You never were." After the crowd cleared, I packed up my things alone. There was no dinner afterward, no celebration. Just me in the evening air, cool and soft like an exhale. I walked home instead of calling a car. Halfway there, I pulled out my headphones and scrolled through old playlists. One of the songs caught my eye. An old folk tune my mom used to hum while folding laundry. I hadn't heard it in years. I played it. The music wrapped around me like an old sweater. Not comforting, not painful. Just familiar. I walked with it echoing in my ears, past streetlights and quiet windows, and let it settle in my chest. I wasn't happy, but I wasn't hollow either. I was something in between, something still forming. Maybe that was enough. It started with a circle of folding chairs and a box of tissues in the middle. The group therapy room was nothing special. Neutral walls, 2 bright lights, a coffee machine that hissed like it had feelings. But the people sitting there were real. Too real, almost. Each one holding a wound they weren't sure how to show yet. "My name is Anna," I said when it was my turn. "And I'm not sure if my family was toxic or just incomplete." Heads nodded. Someone exhaled like I'd said something they'd been holding in for years. I told them about growing up in a house full of smiles that never looked my way. About being loved in theory, but forgotten in practice. I said the words out loud, words that had only lived in my writing before. It wasn't abuse. It was neglect in slow motion. The therapist said that kind of pain was the hardest to name. It didn't leave bruises, just a sense of being unnecessary. Week by week, I returned. I listened. I shared. I learned that healing wasn't a straight line. It was a spiral. 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 3 sideways. Then maybe you breathe a little easier. Then came the package. No return address, but I knew the handwriting on the envelope. Curved letters. A little too perfect. Inside was a small velvet box and a note. "I kept this for too long. It always belonged to both of us. I'm sorry. Lily." I opened the box. The necklace. The one our mom gave us when we were little. 2 halves of a silver heart. Mine had gone missing years ago. Or maybe it had been taken. I never asked. I held it in my palm. Cool metal. Familiar weight. For a moment, I just stared. Then I closed my hand around it. No tears, just breath. Not forgiveness, not yet. But something softer than anger, something close to understanding. A few days later, I saw Lily's TikTok account had changed. Most of her content was gone. Deleted. The bio now read, "Taking time to be a person, not a persona." Her latest post was a text-only image. "I am the product of a well-filtered family. That doesn't mean I'm proud of it." No hashtags, no sound. It wasn't much. But it was honest. And for Lily, that was new. I didn't message her, but I didn't block her either. Instead, I focused on what I could build. With the help of Professor Bennett and a few contacts from the literary world, I launched a small workshop called Writing to Heal. We met in a borrowed room above a second-hand bookstore. Every Tuesday night, the forgotten daughters, the ignored sons, the quiet ones gathered around mismatched chairs and poured truth onto paper. No one had to be a writer. They just had to be human. We wrote letters we'd never send, stories that sounded like fiction but weren't, poems that didn't rhyme but hurt in all the right ways. One girl wrote about being called the mistake baby. Another guy wrote about being the invisible middle child. We laughed, we cried, we listened, and somehow we all felt lighter. One night, as I cleaned up after the group had left, I found an envelope left on my chair. No name. Inside was a note in handwriting I hadn't seen in months. "I came tonight. I didn't stay. But I listened. I'm learning to read what you write before I try to explain it away. Mom." I sat there for a long time, holding the paper like it might dissolve. It didn't say sorry. It didn't say I love you. It didn't even say she was proud. But it said she was trying, and maybe that was more than I ever thought I'd get. I folded the note and slipped it into my wallet, right behind the photo of me and Lily from when we were kids, back when things were simple because we were too young to know what silence meant. I didn't rush to call her. I didn't plan a reunion. But I let the image stay there, tucked away like a seed, something I could plant when I was ready. That night I walked home under a sky that didn't feel as heavy as it used to. No dramatic endings, no orchestral music, just steps, one after the other. Like I was learning how to exist in a life I built with both hands. A year passed without ceremony. No parties, no interviews, no staged reunions. Just days. Days filled with coffee that got cold before I could finish it. More books that took too long to read. And quiet mornings that didn't ache like they used to. The award invitation arrived in a thick, expensive envelope. Gold trim. Embossed letters. The National Voice Award, honoring powerful narratives in modern literature. Recipient, Anna Peterson. The ceremony was scheduled for late spring. Black tie, press attendance guaranteed. The kind of night most debut authors dream about. I declined. Not because I wasn't honored, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't need it to validate the truth I had already lived. Some people build careers on being seen. I built peace on being heard. Instead, on the night of the ceremony, I sat in a small booth at the cafe where I used to work, sipping lukewarm tea and reading the latest submission from a girl in my writing group. It was a letter to her father. She ended it with, "I don't need you to change. I just needed to stop shrinking." I smiled, folded the paper, and tucked it into my bag. Then I heard the bell above the door. I looked up. It was him. My father stood in the doorway, slightly hunched, hair grayer than I remembered. He scanned the room until our eyes met. We hadn't spoken in over 10 months. I didn't move. Neither did he. Then, slowly, he walked over to my table. "May I?" he asked. I nodded once. He sat down across from me. No coffee, no handshake, just silence. Then he said it. I read it all. Every page. His voice was softer than I'd ever heard it, like he was unsure of its weight now. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Instead, I placed my hand on the table, palm down, and he placed his nearby, not touching, just present. For the first time in our lives, we sat together without performance, no roles, no scripts, just people, breathing. That was enough. Months later, I was invited to speak at a university conference on trauma narratives. The room was filled with literature professors, social workers, students holding notebooks with the corners bent. I stood at the podium, adjusting the mic, and took a slow breath. I didn't write to expose, I began. I didn't write to wound. I didn't even write to be brave. I looked around, scanning the rows of faces, some curious, some teary. I wrote because I didn't want to disappear. The silence in the room wasn't heavy. It was sacred. My story is just one version of what happens when love isn't evenly distributed, when attention is mistaken for affection, when a child learns that the only way to be safe is to be silent. I ended with, I hope my words make space for yours. The applause wasn't thunderous. It was steady, steady enough to feel like truth. Weeks after the talk, I received a package from the university. Inside was a syllabus, marked for the upcoming semester. English 324, Family Silence and Hidden Grief. My book was listed on the required reading list. I didn't cry, but I sat very still for a long time. One evening, I visited my childhood home. Not to talk, not to rehash, just to see. Mom wasn't there, but Lily was. She let me in, didn't say much, just offered me tea. We sat on the floor of her room, the way we used to when we were kids. I read it again, she said, nodding toward the copy of my book on her shelf, slower this time. I smiled. Did it still make you mad? She shrugged. Some parts, yeah, but mostly it made me feel less special and more real. That was her way of saying thank you. Before I left, she handed me an old family photo, the one from our beach trip when I was 13. The one I was barely in, cut off at the edge, mid-blink. But something had changed. She had digitally restored it, recentered it. Now I was in the middle, smiling. Not a wide smile, just enough. I figured, she said, you deserved to exist in full. I took the photo home, framed it. It wasn't proof. It wasn't redemption. It was acknowledgement. And sometimes that's the real miracle. If you've ever felt like Anna, like someone whose name was only spoken in comparison, whose worth was measured in shadows, then I hope you know this. You survived what no one saw. You lived a story no one wrote. Until now.